I'm the editor of EnviroPolitics, and I have a very special guest today, Mr. Lyle Rawlings, who is a veteran solar industry participant in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and very highly regarded in the industry and in the legislature, where he has been giving advice to legislators on solar energy for a number of years. Today, I'm just going to turn it over to Lyle because he's got a great presentation. I don't want to slow it down. I would just recommend for any of you who see this that you pay attention, maybe make some notes, and maybe go back and listen to it again a second time. I've had the ability to hear this Lyle's presentation more than once, and every time I listen to it, I get something. I get more out of it, and I get a little more annoyed too at how the current rate structure is set up in New Jersey. And Lyle, of course, is going to tell you all about that. But I'm just going to turn it over to him right now. Lyle, you want to take it away?
Sure, Frank. Thank you, and always good to talk to you. And yeah, I get more annoyed the more I learn about it too. And um, my colleagues and I have been working with PJM for a very, very long time, and we started doing a very deep dive into this price crisis about 7 months ago, and a real deep dive. And there are thousands and thousands of pages of reports and manuals and all kinds of things to dig through. So it's an enormous amount of material to go through, and I'm still finding new things that get me outraged and annoyed. So I know what you're experiencing, uh, and unfortunately, that's part of the problem. Most people have never heard of PJM, and energy professionals certainly have, but some of those energy professionals that deal with PJM more than I do claim that nobody at PJM even understands PJM completely. It is an incredibly complex and arcane world, and almost seems deliberately so sometimes. But and first of all, just by way of introduction, I have a solar company that does large scale solar plus batteries and microgrids all over the East Coast. And 28 years ago, I also founded the Mid-Atlantic Solar and Storage Industries Association, which right now is about 75 companies, most of them local New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Delaware companies that do business in this region. So we got into this issue of the sudden and large price spikes that we experienced here in New Jersey because the political figures and policymakers got so excited and concerned and almost panicked about this because of the potential for a tremendous public backlash, and rightly so, that first of all, the blame started flying in every direction, and some of it started coming in the direction of the solar industry, including a couple of bills in New Jersey that would have retroactively slashed compensation for solar projects that were developed all the way from 2003 through 2020, about 14-15 billion dollars of previous investment. And that slashing of those incentives would have put those investments underwater. So that's a pretty darn serious issue for us. And so we engaged in that, and that's going pretty well. But clearly, solar and clean energy policy was getting blamed for this electric price hike. And it was very hard to, very easy to show that that was not true. And in fact, the BPU was on our side in this matter. They did an analysis saying that, and this is something that President Gul Sudofi said on two public occasions, if it had not been for solar and wind capacity in the PJM region, the price hikes that we experienced would have been 60% worse than they were. And that would have cost an additional $1 billion over the coming year for New Jersey ratepayers. So that pretty soundly refuted the claim that clean energy policy was to blame. But we understood that it was not enough to say, hey, it wasn't us. We had to find out who and what was responsible. And that's why 7 months ago, we started digging in deeply into what were the root causes of these price hikes with our existing expertise from years of dealing with it, and also by diving into these thousands of pages of reports and testimony and manuals.
Lyle, if you let me just interrupt just for a second. I failed in my introduction about you to say, and what we're really talking about here today, and you sort of mentioned it, is the price hike that New Jerseyans are facing. It's 20%, which is just shocking. And of course, the customers are going to be really shocked when they get the bill. They haven't gotten the bill yet because legislators did a very clever thing. They put off the implementation of the rates until after the November election, so they wouldn't be heard at the ballot box. But so that's what you're talking about. That's what precipitated all of your research and your presentation today. So sorry for the interruption, but I wanted to clarify that.
No, that's fine. And part of the hard part of trying to inform people who aren't energy professionals about this is that politically it's been made into an argument about New Jersey policy. But this was not a New Jersey problem, it was a regional problem. At the same time, it hit 13 states plus DC, and it came out of the wholesale electric market, and New Jersey has no jurisdiction over the wholesale market, neither does any other state. It's under federal jurisdiction. So you could say this is a federal problem, but it goes beyond that because the entity that I mentioned before, PJM, which most people have never heard of, is the man behind the curtain, so to speak. Now, this presentation, which I can make available to you, we'll start with this very short sentence. Now, actually, the electric bills on average jumped by 18%. It was like some utilities were 17, some were 20, average 18%. That's still a lot. It's huge. But I had already said it happened throughout the territory of PJM. PJM is the grid operator for this region. It has a huge swath of the country, incorporates 20% of the entire New Jersey population. Start with this very short, and this has happened to all of them. Now, actually, the electric bills, some of them average jumped by 18%. It was increases than we did. Some utilities were 17. Some prices have gone extremely high, and that's a lot of low-income people. So not just us. PJM is the grid operator for that region, which means that they physically run the transmission system that moves electricity around this region at high voltage. But since deregulation, which was all the way back in 1999, when utilities were deregulated and no longer were the energy generators, but just the people who carry it to your home, after that, PJM took on an additional, quite a bit of additional responsibility for running the wholesale energy markets. And this is where the problem has taken place. And as I said before, they are under federal jurisdiction, under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There's no jurisdiction by the states. We cannot tell them what to do. None of the states can. And furthermore, the governance of PJM is by its members. They're governed by their members, and their voting is structured in such a way that 80% of the vote is structured so that this 80% of the vote is by the energy companies. And so when they design auctions in the market, when they run auctions in the market and that sort of thing, they're literally voting their own profit. It's a fundamental conflict of interest. And that is one of the fundamental root causes of this problem, is that you've got the fox guarding the hen house. So in this case, what happened in October of 2024 is part of the wholesale markets is something called the capacity markets. And what the capacity market is to make sure that there's enough electricity for the highest peaks, which happen in the summer, and make sure that there's enough power available during those just a few hours where they hit the highest peaks so that we don't get brownouts or blackouts. And the capacity market uh, obtains an assurance of capacity for those, mainly for what's called the 5 coincident peaks, the 5 highest hours of the year, and gets a promise from generators that they will be there if called upon to provide capacity during those 5 hours or whenever there's an emergency for needing power that PJM calls upon them. So really, all they're getting paid for is a promise. They may or may not even be called upon, but we do need to make sure that we don't get brownouts and blackouts when these peaks occur. But it's how they structured this market that's a problem. And so when we looked into this, we saw that uh, it's fair to say that PJM manipulated the market that to make these high prices and this incredible spike that we got inevitable. What happened in the 2024 auction is the capacity price determined by the auction that is part of people's bills went up by 9 times, actually 9.3 times higher than it had been the year before. That's an incredible jump, a 9x jump in 1 year. And so we went to find out what were the factors in that auction that made that price go so high. Normally, uh, these capacity charges are a fairly small part of people's bills. Even if you just look at the wholesale price of power, it's normally a fairly small fraction of that. But when it blows up by 9.3 times, then it becomes a very large fraction of the wholesale price of power. So how did that happen in October of 2024? And by the way, that auction set the price of capacity charges for what's called the 2025-2026 delivery year, which starts June 1st of 2025. So as you said, we're already in it. Those higher prices should be landing on people starting with their July bill. But New Jersey policymakers are delaying that. They've also created a rebate program to rebate some of these costs to people just to provide some relief. It's just the state is doing whatever it can do for a problem that came from outside. So now to talk about how this auction was manipulated to create a high price. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to skip this slide because it's a summary of all the findings, and I'm just going to go through them in detail. So we can come back to the summary if you like. Who is PJM? We've already covered that. The regional transmission organization, largest in the country, and governed by the energy companies, essentially the ones who are profiting from its policies. What's the magnitude of this? These capacity prices over the next 2 years are going to have a cost that totals about $30.8 billion, almost $31 billion across the PJM region. That's the cost people have to pay through a portion of their bills. And that's pretty huge. And you can see from this graph that I'm showing that the previous 2 years, the tall bars are 2025 and 2026 delivery years. So before that, it was a small fraction of that cost. And we're going to talk about where that $31 billion goes and what that money is supposed to be doing. So, uh, so there were basically three things that were manipulated, basic factors manipulated in this auction. One is the design of the auction itself. There's something really crazy about how this auction is designed. It's called a single clearing price mechanism, and it guarantees that prices are going to be higher than they really need to be. I'm going to go into that further. Um, in any kind of procurement or any kind of commodity market, people generally know that it's the balance of supply and demand that determines whether prices go up or they go down. And when there's not enough supply or too much demand, that makes prices go up. Um, and then the design of a market can make it so that very small changes really make huge changes in the price, or it can be a well-regulated market where small changes in the supply or demand make small changes in the price. Unfortunately, we have the former, where this is extremely sensitive, where very small changes can make very big swings in the price. That's part of the problem. And we'll go into some additional issues beyond these three fundamental things. So this, oops, I'm sorry. This graph, no, sorry again. There we go. This is a history of capacity prices in PJM since 2007. And you can see how volatile it is. It's like a sawtooth. It jumps way up and then immediately goes way down, up again, down again all the time. But the far right of this graph shows what happened in the last two auctions. The one I talked about in 2024 is now the next to last auction, because just a few weeks ago, they held the one that's going to govern 2026 and 2027, and it went even higher than the one that caused all of this consternation politically. So, and I state in this that there were two 6.5 hour long joint legislative committee hearings where a lot of testifiers were grilled about this problem, including an official from PJM. And he said, you have to understand that the capacity auction is extremely sensitive to small changes. So we have to ask the question, well, why is it so sensitive to small changes? Why is it so volatile that it can shoot up by tremendous factors like this? And that really is the matter of the fundamental design of the auction, which is, as I said, is the single clearing price mechanism. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which does have jurisdiction over PJM, the former chair, who's just retired from the commission, is former Commissioner Mark Christie. And he wrote a long paper recently saying these single clearing price mechanisms should be done away with. He said we should reconsider having these in the U.S. energy markets. What that means, the single clearing price mechanism, is that when you have a procurement and you have bidding, in this type of market, they stack up the bids from the lowest to the highest bid. And of course, you want lower prices. So you stack them up starting with the lowest and then go up until basically until you've met a target that you want to procure. And then once you've hit that target, you stop. But the highest bid you accepted in before you hit that target sets the price for all the bidders. So bidders who bid very low or even zero are getting the highest price that the highest bidder bid in. If that sounds crazy, then to you, then you're right. It is crazy. There's all kinds of excuses for why that should be, but there's really no rational reason why you have to pay everybody the highest price that any bidder went in. And I can tell you, in other kinds of energy procurements, the kind that clean energy people bid into, they never let us get the highest price for the highest bidder. We get the price that we bid in. It's called pay as bid. And that's the way most kind of bids are run. You get the price that you bid in. So
So
this is
Lowell, it's somewhat akin to right now in somebody wants to build a school wants to build a new building or a town or anything like that, and they're all subject to public bidding laws, and those public bidding laws generally end up awarding the construction to the contractor who comes in with the lowest bid or a very reasonable bid. But you're saying that under this scenario, someone could come in with a very low bid and still win be paid. It's not quite as analogous, but it's
yeah.
the
Well,
the accepted
that's
bid is what
exactly
paid
right.
everybody. Yeah, a certain amount.
When most people think about bidding, and in my business, when we bid for public entities that want solar, yeah, they take the lowest bid wins, and the winner gets what they bid.
Mhm.
It'd be great for us if we got what the highest bid was when we win a bid, but that never happens. So it's really inexcusable, and it makes things incredibly volatile. If you have a bidding market with what's called a hockey stick shaped bid curve, and that's what you see in this graph, and this is an actual copy of what PJM, and in this case, the independent market monitor who monitors PJM for FERC, what they have published as the actual bid curve. They call it a smoothed curve. So they're not showing each curve, each bid exactly, but it's a
Mhm.
curve that's smoothed over all the bids. And you can see that that's the bid curve is that blue line. And you can see that 85% of the bidders bid zero into this auction. And then it started just going up very, very rapidly. You can see it gets very steep, almost vertical, until it meets the red line. And the red line was the target that they were supposed to hit. In other words, that's when they would stop accepting bids. And then that price that just shot up very suddenly, just on the last few bids, that gets paid to everybody, including the 85% of the bidders who bid zero. They get that extremely high price too. So I'm gonna, sorry, it's very jumpy. I'm sorry about that. This shows some detail, but it's a critical detail that in actuality, um, the bids hit 100% of the price target, where PJM says this is a target where we have enough capacity to be reliable. It's called the reliability requirement, and that it's expressed in this graph by the vertical black line. That's the line that you have to cross to say we've got enough capacity, we've hit the target that we wanted. And the curious thing is the 2024 bid hit that target at a price of 104, 104 and a half, but they didn't stop at 100%. They didn't stop when they had satisfied the reliability requirement. They kept on going and accepted another 1.7% beyond the 100%. So instead of stopping at 100, they stopped at 101.7% of the reliability requirement. And just that extra 1.7% drove that price from 104 and a half up to 270.
Wow.
So they jumped the price by another 158% just by adding another 1.7%. So why didn't they stop at 100 when they had satisfied the reliability requirement? Why did they have to drive it further to go up to that 270 level, that 9x increase from the previous year? That to me is completely outrageous when you've got $31 billion being paid by the people across the region. Now, before we get to the what happened in the auction, there's another thing, two other things they do to manipulate the market. One is they set that demand target that we talked about, that they would go up to. Now, if they the demand target is a prediction. what is the demand going to be in the future? It doesn't have anything to do with what it is the previous year. They look forward and say, what will the demand be in the future? And if they exaggerate the growth in that demand, then that's going to drive the price up because you have to get more bids in to satisfy it. It's pretty widely perceived at this point that they inappropriately inflated that demand, and everything that we've looked into said that they very, very much inflated the demand. And the most outrageous thing about it, I'm going to get to in a further slide. But the graph that's shown on this slide is one that they like to show, where the dotted line that goes way, way up, that's their most recent demand forecast for future years, going all the way out to 2040. And you can see that that dotted black line goes up very steeply, and they want to point that out as to here's why you're paying so much for electricity, is because demand is increasing so much. But if you look at the other end of that graph, what we've shown, and it's a little too much to see right here and now, but if you look at the history of their past predictions of growth, they've always been too high. They always miss the mark on the high side consistently with their historical forecasts. And in this case, there are several reasons to believe that they really went over the top with this one. They point to three things. They point to building electrification that's driving up demand. They point to electric vehicles that are using electricity where it used to be gasoline, that's driving up demand. And most of all, they talk about data centers. So we looked into, for instance, their EV projections and found that they, in light of what's actually happening today, they were grossly exaggerated. But even if you took their EV growth and translated that into electrical growth, it wouldn't have been more than 0.5% growth over the next 3 years. So there's really very little that you can attribute to that. Building electrification, it's barely happening at all. You can't really say that that's doing it. Data centers, it's a matter of anybody's opinion, how much they're going to grow. In fact, in the BPU's recent technical conference, several speakers said, you cannot predict with any accuracy what growth in the future is going to be. And data centers in particular is kind of a big unknown, but it's come out that in some cases, PJM double counted or triple counted the potential developments that were known. And they also uncritically assumed that everybody who had applied for interconnection was going to build their data centers. Now, these are private speculative developments, and history shows that most such developments that are speculative, the majority of them never get built. There's all kinds of reasons. They didn't get their financing. They have problems with property. Data centers need a lot of water, so they need water rights. A lot of things that can shoot a project down. And yet they assumed that 100% of them would get done. It's kind of a ridiculous assumption. And then they assumed that the technology would not advance. And this is one of the most fast advancing technologies ever that is highly likely to get more efficient over time, so that that will keep growth down. In fact, just recently, the Chinese DeepSeek discovery on AI that could do the same work with 1/10 of the processing power. That's one example of how technological innovation is going to keep that growth down. So in any case, they grossly overestimated demand. That's one of the factors that drove that price up. Now, what about the other side of the supply-demand equation, and that is supply? Well, they also inappropriately discounted the supply. Every bidder in with any type of generation asset, be it nuclear, be it solar, be it natural gas, etc., gets a discount factor that PJM itself decides on. And they've monkeyed with these factors over time and decreased them so that the bidders, when they bid in how much capacity they have, they have these discounts to what actually counts toward the outcome of the auction. So these discounts also drive the price up by decreasing the amount of supply that can be bid in and eligible. And a couple of examples are in this slide where in terms of that factor, it's now called something new. It's called the ELCC, or effective load carrying capacity. But initially, it used to be 38% of the rated capacity of the solar would count toward its capacity value. Now they've decreased the 38% all the way down to 8%. And the one that has caused the most controversy, something that the independent market monitor has said is outrageous in testimony and in reports, and he's complained to the PJM about it. They decreased the factor for natural gas-fired power. It used to be in the 90s, that percentage that's applied to it, and now it's 60% for one type of natural gas and 74% for the other. Because that's the largest source of capacity in the market, a change in that is taking several gigawatts out of the supply bucket. And that has an enormous effect on the price that happens in this auction. And the market monitor said that was completely inappropriate. First of all, he said that this new ELCC rating methodology is broken, and he has recommended canning it completely and replacing it with something he said would work a lot better. But he has said that this reduction in the natural gas factor was completely unnecessary and inappropriate. The reasoning was that wintertime performance had been bad during a couple of bad winter storms, especially Winter Storm Elliott, and the reliability problems that happened during Winter Storm Elliott showed the natural gas plants to be unreliable, and therefore they were dinged. Well, first of all, the capacity prices are being applied to a summer peak, not a winter peak. But leaving that aside, the market monitor said the real reason was not equipment failures or failures in gas supply. It was a failure on the part of PJM to properly notify and dispatch and schedule the power in time, and that they fixed that problem so that they should be restoring these factors to what they were, but they still are keeping them. So this is a lot of detail. I know it's pretty deep, but what I'm saying overall, and what many are saying, but we're showing in detail, is that we've got a crazy auction design that makes it inevitable that the prices will shoot up due to small changes in supply and demand. But furthermore, PJM was manipulating supply and manipulating demand to guarantee that those prices would go extremely high. And overall, the impression you get in reading their reports is that they're supposed to be ensuring reliability, and that's supposed to be paramount, and trying to do that at the lowest possible cost. But it seems that their choices are more about driving price up to a desired price level. And now we'll talk about why you would need that price level. So the theory with the capacity market, the reason that it exists at all is in order to cure what's called a gap between what the energy markets are feeding to generators and their cost of producing power. And it's being said that their cost of producing power is higher than the amount of revenue they can get from the energy markets. So they need something extra. They need something to fill that gap between their cost to produce it and what they're getting from the energy markets. So we'll deal with that in a minute. And it's also to send a market signal to new entrants, because, if there is new growth, we're going to need new sources of capacity. And so we've got to attract investors in new power plants in the region, and this capacity market is supposed to attract them. So one little factoid that's important to realize is that all this talk of growth, data centers, EVs, all the rest of this, all this talk of growth, almost everybody that I talk to is convinced that demand is rising. But in fact, it's a prediction of future demand rising. What's actually happening is that New Jersey demand is dropping. It dropped from 2019 all the way through the latest full year of 2024. It dropped by a full 6%. That's huge. That means that from here, we have to go up by 66%, not 66, 6%, just to get back to where we were in 2019. So this is purely theoretical, and yet we're paying for it now. But the theory, again, is we have to attract these new entrants, and it costs them more to generate the power now, which is true. It does cost more to generate the power now. But the thing is that we are not paying this money to new entrants. We're paying all of that $31 billion is going to old plants, right? So it's not getting paid to new entrants because they don't exist yet. You can't pay them. They're not here. It's all being paid to old plants. So why are we paying old plants now to get new entrants at some point in the future? And we know now that it takes at least 5 to 7 years now to build a new gas plant. There's a big shortage of turbines, of 5 to 7 year shortage just to buy a gas turbine. So if there are new investors in the wings, it's going to take 5 to 7 years for them to come online. So where is this money going to? It's going to the old plants, those 85% that I showed before that bid zero into the auction. 2/3 of the capacity in the PJM market is over 20 years old, and 80% of it is over 10 years old. These are plants that have already paid off their initial investments, and they have only operating costs in terms of the cost to make that supply. And the other change is, and this is the most recent report from the Market Monitor, which is up on the screen now, the wholesale cost of energy between the first half of 2024 and the first half of 2025, that's what depicted here, and that's the dark blue part of the stack on the bottom, that wholesale cost of energy went up by 60% between those 2 half years. So that means energy prices are so much higher now that these generators are getting paid very well for the energy. And one of the top experts nationwide in how RTOs work told me in PJM, we don't need a capacity market at all because there is no gap, he claims. And this is one of the largest consulting firms for RTOs and utilities. So that increase in energy prices makes it all the more bizarre that we're paying higher than ever capacity prices. So these old plants are getting pure profit off of this auction. So that's really the core of it. So the question is, what do we do about it? Clearly, we need reform. Clearly, the capacity market is broken, and PJM's governance is not working to deliver reliability at the best possible price. And it gets tough from there on in, because if we don't have jurisdiction over PJM, what do we do? There's a lot of things that are possibilities. One that the Market Monitor, Dr. Joe Bowring, who's really smart, he's been saying over and over again, these data centers, if they're the major cause of the possible future growth, we should require them to bring their own power. Because he's saying, why should all the consumers, all the ratepayers in the region be subsidizing these data centers? via the high prices, the 20% increases that they're seeing. It's not fair. So he says, let them bring their own power when they develop. Now, of course, you need to do that in cooperation with governors from several different states, because if one imposes that and then the developers just move to another state, you defeated the purpose. And in fact, last Monday, there was a meeting of all the PJM governors. They met with PJM, and one thing they demanded was a reform of governance. They said there should be 2 seats where the states will be represented on your board. And basically, PJM said no. But the governors got together and they formed a collaborative called the PJM Governors Collaborative so that they can take collective action. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take collective action. Things like making, for all the states to make the data centers bring their own power rather than pushing the burden onto the ratepayers. Deeper reform of PJM is needed. What can make that happen? I don't know. But states can make other choices. One is that they can withdraw from the capacity market and take care of their own capacity needs. That's hard. It could be expensive and it takes a while. You need FERC approval to do it, but it is doable. That's something to explore. You could go a little further and pull out of PJM completely and form a state independent system operator like New York has and many other states. Or you could gather together with a few other states and have a multi-state independent ISO with more public oversight. So, just pull out of PJM completely is another possibility. And then ultimately, you could even talk about re-regulating, go back to the way it was before deregulation. Because the theory behind deregulation was markets are always the most efficient way to get the lowest price. This is proving that that's not true. It also turned out to be absolutely not true in the solar world. So we're learning this over and over that in many circumstances, and if not well designed, markets can be terrible at trying to find a low price, as they were in this case. And so there's a range of things that can be done. And the next governor in New Jersey hopefully will be tackling this aggressively, and certainly other governors have the torches and pitchforks out for PJM.
Lyle, that was an amazing performance.
Well,
It reflects the amount of work that you put into, you and your colleagues have put into this analysis that you've done, especially when you're up against a structure that seems to cushion itself from observation or analysis with all this arcane language and levels of things that the layman doesn't understand. And in fact, like you said, a lot of experts don't understand. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe. But
yeah.
What you've done here is a real public service because you get people focusing on it, especially the people who really can have an effect, like you say, legislators and governors. And so I want to congratulate you for this and for your time here today.
Well, thank you. And I want folks to know that this is not in the self-interest of the solar community, because we're electricity sellers too. And high prices and escalating prices are wonderful news to us. But in the long term, it's not good, because the more people are paying for their electricity, the less room there is for the clean sources of electricity. But in the short term, we should let this happen because we can sell our products for a higher price. And with the loss of the federal incentive, we desperately need that. But this is just too outrageous to leave alone. And we're really just scratching the surface with this information. There's much more behind it.
And Lyle, speaking of the loss of the federal subsidies and the effect on solar industries, When I contacted you originally, I thought that would be the nature of our interview. And that's an important discussion, and I hope you'll
Mm.
be available for that discussion at a later time.
I certainly will. There's a whole lot to say about that too.